Hello and welcome back to this video series on setting up my metadata-driven processing framework for Azure Data Factory from scratch and in your environment. This is now part 10, and what we're going to do in part 10 is just look at email alerting, which is a new feature that was added in release 1.7 of the framework. So let's start with Visual Studio. And what you may remember is that when we published the Azure Functions into our Azure Functions app that we have in our tenant, we didn't actually configure any of the SMTP details that we need for the send email function. So the first thing I want to do is just talk you through doing that, just in case you aren't familiar. Now, the SMTP details, they are actually stored in the app settings for the Azure Function app. This just means that every time an email is sent, the function doesn't have to call off to Key Vault or the database or somewhere. They are just stored locally to the Functions app in this case. So the way we do that and the way that we handle that is with this project, what I've done for you to try and help is give you a template local settings file that we can use with the project. The actual local settings file, it's ignored now as part of the GitHub repo, which is why it's not here. But what we can do is we can just copy this template that I've given you, and we can just paste that in there, and let's rename it to local.settings. So we can now use that, and you'll see the content of the JSON's already there. So what I did was I reached out to my friendly Azure admin, me, and they provided me with some SMTP settings, so I can actually send some emails. I'm actually using Office 365 on this occasion, and the JSON is trying to be clever for me and give me extra things I don't want. So I just need to provide the host name and the port. So for Office 365, this will probably be the same for you. And then I've got a Microsoft 365 dev environment that I can use, and that will also be the sending from. And then I just need to give it the password for that mailbox, which will be deleted shortly after this video. Sorry. So we now have some local settings, and let's just clean and build that Functions app again. And what I want to just check for is that local settings file is copied to my compiled version, which it now has. Excellent. And assuming the build was successful, yeah. I'm actually just going to run it as well, because if that local settings file isn't there, you get a couple of errors in the local emulator. So I just want to make sure that they've gone away. Which they have. This is good news. So I could actually now just use Postman to hit this function locally if I wanted to, but I don't need to, it's fine. So I'm going to stop that. So we have my local settings file sorted. So what I can now do is I'm just going to publish this Functions app one more time. And what you can do is from the publish screen, it's quite handy. You can actually go and look at the application settings. So it now brings the content of that JSON file into this kind of user interface. You can see it's got the local setting, which I just gave it, and then the remote setting, which is basically what's now missing. So I can just say yes, insert the local values for all of these things, please. And then we can hit OK, and it will then save those app settings now to my Azure function. So what I can actually do is just to confirm that's happened is in the portal, in the Functions app. I'm going to switch back to the classic one. I've not got used to the new Functions Yeah, I can go into my app settings, he says. So in here we can see now those values that were basically just pushed from Visual Studio from that deploy screen. So that's good. I don't actually need to publish the whole functions app again. I can just tell it to now use these application settings. So that means that in theory we can now actually send emails, which is good, from our framework as well. So where that actually happens is in the child pipeline. If we just go in there, you'll see that we now have this check for alerts, which checks if that property is enabled, which will change in a minute. And then if that property is enabled and we have alerts, it will get those email parts and it will hit that send email function. So I don't actually need to do anything in Data Factory to enable this. I just need to give the function those settings. And what I can now do is I can come back to my metadata database. And the first thing that I need to do is in the properties table, I can just now say, yes, enable framework alerting. You may recall I turned that off in a previous video. So that's done. Then the way the metadata for email alerting works is that we have this notion of a recipient. So in the recipients table, we have some email addresses, the name of that person, and their message preference. So, do they want to be copied or sent that email to them? And then we have this alert outcomes table. So for every pipeline status that's reported back to the current execution table, we have that status listed here. And it means that a recipient can subscribe to multiple statuses of a pipeline if they want. And we do that just using a bit mask. So if they want that particular status, they can set that bit value within that mask for them if they want it. And where that's done is in the pipeline alert link table. So what we get here is just a bunch of foreign keys to the pipeline IDs, to the recipient IDs, and then we have that bit value in there as well for whichever particular status they want, and we have those enabled. All of this information actually is populated by default as part of the database post-deployment scripts. So there's values that you see there, you already have them, you can modify this, of course, for your environment. It's a store procedure that's used to add that recipient link. So, you don't have to worry about those bit masks and things. You can just say to the store procedure, for this recipient name, I want all alerts, and it will then go and do that effort for you in the metadata to add the relationships. So you don't need to worry about those foreign keys. It's maybe worth pointing out as well that if you open Azure Data Studio, I've provided for you in the Git repo this handy notebook, which has got a lot of code snippets in for various things within the framework. But in the case of email alerting, the one I want to call out for you is this query. Let's get the where clause as well. So if I were to copy and run that query, it's doing all of those joins for you. Again, you don't need to worry about it, but you can pass in an email address and you can quickly see what pipeline alerts that particular email address is subscribed to and what status they're going to expect from that. Anyway, so the metadata is kind of already taken care of for you here. You can use those default values if you want, although I don't want to receive your pipeline alerts. And actually, this developer tenant, it doesn't allow external emails anyway, so you'll just get a bunch of bounce backs on your side. But you can use this default metadata as a template for what you now want to go and add. So I've enabled the property, I've given the function its app settings. I'm actually just now going to come and trigger my parent pipeline again. Let's just clear the decks. So let's look at my execution table. So we've got that metadata, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep an eye on my Outlook client. So you see I've got these three test recipients already in my Outlook client. So as soon as we've got I think a success status, we should get an alert to that first test user. So it's just going through the motions, what we did in part 9 of this video where we ran it. So some very low weight values for those workers, just to keep it demo friendly. Then we just got to wait a few seconds for that infant to check and finish and know that those worker pipelines have completed. So we've got a few check values coming in now, so that that infant is iterating and figuring out if it's happened. And we do have a success on wait 3. So let's just check our mailbox. There we go. Wait 3, success. So we've got details about the execution ID. It was the same data factory that both called and actually handled the worker. So, some start time information. You can see we've got those other alerts coming in now for stage 1 as well, and we've got that success status. So successes will come in as a low priority, failures will come high, and then anything else will get a normal status in your email alerting. So, just an optional feature that you can enable now from the framework if you do want direct alerts coming from there. You might have other ways to do alerting from Data Factory in your environment, totally your choice. You can disable it in the properties. But if you want, you have that metadata and you have that capability within here as well. That's it for this video, folks. Thank you very much for watching.